God chose the foolishness of preaching to change people's lives. Amen?
It's the Bible and no other book. Get this. It's your Bible, the one you hold in your hand this morning, the one that's in your lap today. It's this book and no other book. It's the Bible that tells us that Jesus has taken care of the problem of sin and death, that He took all the sins of man upon Himself and bore the penalty and the punishment of those sins on the cross of Calvary. No other book tells us that.
Well, in the beginning, really we prayed and asked the Lord to where He would send us. We were willing to go anywhere. But we love the West Coast, and we lived out here. We love the mountains and all of that. And so we asked the Lord if it's possible that we could come to the West Coast. And we also asked the Lord to give us a place that we could spend the rest of our lives. In that day, the average stay of a pastor on the West Coast, especially in the Northwest, was 18 to 24 months. A lot of churches without pastors, and just a lot of people unchurched and so forth. So we asked the Lord to send us like missionaries. Missionaries, many of them died on the field they served. They spent their whole life there. And why couldn't pastors do that? Why couldn't they spend their whole life building a church? And so that's what we asked the Lord to do, and that's exactly what He did for us.
In those early days, we contacted probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 500 people that we had them on a mailing list at the time. And we received a lot of comments back, most of them negative, from people saying, we don't want another church in Oregon. But we had a letter from Tom and Marie Reeves that asked us to come and said they've been praying for years for someone to come and start an independent Baptist church in Medford. And that really, I think, probably was the impetus to cause us to really consider that this is the Lord's leading to come to Medford, Oregon.
I went out and visited Tom and Marie right after I got here. I found out that they wanted me to come by their house, and so I did. And they lived in a little trailer over in Ashland. They'd served the Gospel Rescue Mission for years and years and years. But I remember the night I first visited over there, I went there and they were just finishing their evening meal. And so he said, if you don't mind, sit down over there and we'll be with you in just a minute. So I said, fine. I sat down, and it wasn't but a second. He turned to me and pointed his finger right in my face. He said, listen to me. You're here because my wife and I prayed you here. And you're here to start a church because God answered our prayers, and don't you forget that. We went back and ate his pie and coffee, and then we visited for the rest of the evening. When we first started, I had a 1967 Chevrolet pickup with a borrowed camper on the back of it, and I slept in the campground in Ashland, and came over here to Medford and did the business of the church, getting things set up. And then I would visit with people who had indicated they wanted to visit or knew someone else who wanted to visit. They didn't have churches or anything, and so I would go and visit. And I'd spend as late as 1 o'clock in the morning with people because they just were so hungry for a pastor to be in their home that they just didn't want you to go. So I'd leave about 1 o'clock in some of these homes and get back out to the campground and get up the next morning early and head back to Medford. We went to the Holiday Inn. We had just a few months to be there because they had their conference season coming in. And we met in one of their main rooms. We met in the hallways. We met in any little room we could find for Sunday school class or whatever. And when that time was up, we had to find another building. And buildings were hard to find. And so we began to pray about it, that God would reveal a place for us. And the Girl Scout Center was one thing that we were told about that was possibilities. So I went up there one morning before 8 o'clock, and when the ladies walked into the office, I walked in with them, and they said, yeah, we do rent it, and how long would you like it for? And so I was able to rent that for the next year or two, however long we might need it, which gave us a nice room to meet in, and a kitchen for Sunday school classrooms where the youth met, and then many of the people had motorhomes and campers. We parked them out front on a Sunday morning, and we had Sunday school classrooms in there as well. It wasn't long we outgrew that place. It was standing room only, and from there we moved to the YMCA, and it was upstairs. We had those narrow stairways to walk up, and the floor sloped, and there was a big swimming pool down below us. And people said, if you go there, you'll lose half your church. The old people won't walk up those stairs. Well, instead, the old people were our inspiration. They walked up those stairs. We even took people in wheelchairs up those stairs. And our church continued to grow there. And in fact, I think we doubled there at that point and got up around 200 or so at that time. And I always kind of laugh because when you walk down the aisle to get saved or to join the church, because the floor is sloped, you sort of limped when you came down, so the lame came and got saved, and it was a blessing to do that. We baptized in the swimming pool, Olympic-sized swimming pool.
And it was heated, so that made it nice.
Yeah, it was heated, made it nice. But in the summertime, it was too much heat because it was really hot up there. But we finally went from there to the Holly Street building.
Coming through Holly Street was a healing for us because we were very deeply hurt when we come to Harvest. And it was a healing because the pastors were very kind, very understanding, and they were what we had been used to, preaching from the Bible and very, very open.
I remember the first Sunday I came, of course, I'm not a very outgoing person. And, people made me feel welcome. Someone came and sat with me. My kids loved it from day one. So it was just a blessing. I prayed for a long time to find a good church home. And I had visited a lot of churches. And there wasn't anything out there like Harvest.
It was a very friendly atmosphere. We were welcomed there real quick.
It was a friendly church. The first Sunday we went, it was Pastor Bob that was preaching. And for the first time, for me, I heard what salvation was. I always believed in God, but I didn't know anything about what it took to be saved. But after the first message from Pastor Bob, it was very clear. We didn't walk forward that first week.
No, it took about 3 weeks.
and the week that we went forward to the altar together. Pastor Mike was preaching, and we went forward, and it was Pastor Bob who got to lead us to the Lord.
So after we came, I was asked to teach a Sunday school for a couple of weeks. A lady was going to be gone. The couple of weeks turned into 32 years. And I enjoyed every minute of it. But we became a part immediately. It seemed like we just fit.
Well, the building was old.
Wooden pews.
Yeah. And had white pews. It was, it was clean. It was a very clean building. And had a very small fellowship hall.
Mm-hmm.
And,
had a lot of fellowships, activities, and young married things going on in there all the time.
Yeah. The Baptist.
It was a good building. It was a good, sturdy building with lots of memories, and the baptistry was down in the ground behind the
and there was a
pulpit there.
A waterfall feature painting behind it
on the back. I hope we have a picture of that for people to see, because that was.
And then the actual wooden altar. We had a regular altar to go to.
We learned as a young family through that altar what it meant to dedicate your children to the Lord and raise them in a church. And we always say, to this day, at our age now even, what would we have done if we hadn't had Harvest Baptist and Pastor Bob and Pastor Mike in our lives? So Holly Street is all good memories to us.
I'll tell you what, we'll build a building soon. Yeah. It's going to take that kind of commitment now, that kind of giving, and we'll build this church that God wants us to build in this area, right out there on that property. Now continue to pray.
Well, after that, just before we came to the new building, Brother Sturm was at our church preaching a revival. And during the revival one night and the invitation, he put out a challenge to see what the people are willing to do to get over here. And it was one of the most tremendous and greatest meetings that we ever had. And I don't know that I could say we ever had another one like it, because children would get up and say they want to give. And one of them in particular, there's three stand out in my mind, but one in particular, he had just started a paper route and had gotten his first check, and he gave every penny of it. He said, I want that new church.
It was the turning point for our church. It seems like decisions were made there about getting out onto this property, and it was a lot of commitments were made during that revival, and due to those commitments, that is the reason we are here today.
Well, it was a tremendous revival meeting. We'd had Brother Bill Sturm with us several times before. I think that was the first year we had J. Harold Smith in that meeting, if he was in that meeting.
Yeah.
But at the conclusion of the first week, we were given testimonies, and a little girl came down the aisle and said, I'd like to give my horse and my saddle to pay off the new church property that we bought over here in Columbus. And it wasn't something we'd promoted. It wasn't something that was even in our minds to try to do. We just bought the land. We figured over the next 10 years or so we could pay off the property and eventually locate out here in South Columbus. But when she came forward and asked to be able to give her horse and her saddle that was brand new to her, and she'd even won some awards with that horse and the saddle, and for her to give that just seemed to motivate everybody in the church. Well, yeah, that's a great idea. Why don't we all get behind this and try to pay off the property? So probably an hour and a half later, by the time it was all said and done, we'd raised, I believe, somewhere around $65,000, $70,000, and more came in after that. And we paid off that property, and were able, as a result, to be able to move forward to building our first buildings out here in South Columbus. So it was a tremendous meeting. No one expected it. It was a surprise to everyone. And we look back on it today, and even then we looked on it. This is God's hand. God was doing this because it was not our intention to do anything like that. We were just glad to have a building on Holly where we had a place to meet, but it was an old building, and we knew eventually we would have to be somewhere else. And God just did a work of a miracle work, I think, that day, and gave us this property.
The meeting continued on, like you say, for 3 weeks, and more offerings came in. People just kept bringing it, and the offering would start on its own. I wouldn't ask for it, and people would just stand up, start coming and bringing things that they wanted to offer for the paying of the building. And finally, I had to say, stop, please stop. We have enough. And because people were bringing all kinds of things. I think one of the most touching things for me, besides the boats and cars and motorhomes and bank accounts and things that were given sacrificially, was that one of the young ladies came forward, and she had tears in her eyes, and she said, I have nothing to give, but I want to give my wedding rings. And she gave her wedding ring. And that started another movement. And before long, people were giving their wedding rings, men and women. And anything of value like that they brought in. I had this whole bag full of jewelry. And the spirit was, you can't put words to the kind of spirit that was. It's not something humanly generated. It had to be the God's Spirit doing that.
And it was just very you could just feel the Spirit in the people. The adults, there were people that said, well, I'm going to sell my car and give whatever I get. And there were ladies that had nothing else to give because they weren't working or anything. They were giving their wedding rings. They were giving anything that they had.
And so the following Sunday, I announced to the folks we had enough money, we were okay, and that I think one of the greatest gifts that demonstrated the heart of the people was their giving of their wedding rings and so forth. And I said, I'm happy to say today that God has provided, and I'd like to give your rings back to you. And once again, there was a lot of tears on their part for the fact we just didn't take that was most precious to them and use it, but that we were able to see God work around that and provide more than enough, as God always does. And it built our church. It put such a strong bond in that church to go through that time. And it allowed us as well to be able to get out on this property and pay for what we had and to consider how soon we could begin to build.
Preaching out of his Chevy pickup is turning out to be a growing investment in both time and energy. Harvest Baptist Church is celebrating its 10th anniversary under a big top and out in the sun. A new temple is set to go up on South Columbus Avenue in Medford, where the big top sits today for temporary outdoor services. The new facility will cost close to $1 million, and it will also house a gymnasium for its members. Pastor Bob Gass of Harvest Baptist says the new church is needed.
We are encroaching upon the neighborhood. There are parking problems and not enough room for everybody. We don't have enough Sunday school classroom, and our church is primarily full most of the time. And so they tell you that when you don't have the pews or the parking space, you're not going to get any more people. So people want to come, so we want to provide the room for them.
Well, on our 10th anniversary, we had a tent revival meeting, and there were city officials here. There was all kinds of people. It was wonderful. And that was the time that we had lots of bugs and a lot of things. But oh, how the Lord blessed and how things happened in that meeting. It was just wonderful.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the earwigs?
The tent revival was amazing. There was so much excitement. The Lord just worked marvelously. We were a little annoyed with all the earwigs.
Lots of earwigs.
Yeah, lots of bugs, lots of bugs. The soundboard that we had left it out, and it was full of earwigs.
But it was just an old-fashioned tent revival, and the music and the preaching and just the heart. Everyone had the same spirit, the same heart, the same desire to see that the Lord would work this out. And there were pledges of money for the new building, and how the Lord provided the money is amazing in and of itself.
And exciting to know that how the Lord had been blessing all these people so willing to give for the furtherance of His Word and souls to be saved. And
I remember coming here with Brother Ray Barton. We went through a Master Life program with him, and he would bring the class out here, and we'd pray at this building site, this property, for the Lord to work marvelously, and He did. He worked it all out, and even more than we could have ever imagined.
You have to go through it to really know how close you come to heaven when something really good happens like that. That is the time that we decided to have groundbreaking, and it was another great time. People really were joyful, were excited, and they knew that we now will be able to go ahead and build the new building. and get out of Holly Street. Not that it was a bad place, it was just very cramped for parking, it's just not big enough anymore.
I was on the board back then, and all the board members were there first, and we all had the shovels and did our scoop, and then everybody signed the shovels, and it was an exciting time.
I'm going to go where I know it's soft. So we started this thing together, and it couldn't have been done without Brother Mike's help. He's been gone all these years now on the road, and we see him so very few times during a year's time. But because we started together, I think there's a lot of things we will continue to do together in each major thing that takes place. And to me, this is one of the most major events in the history of our church. So together we'll take the first shovel full of dirt and hopefully throw it in opposite directions. You get a prize for getting the most dirt.
I worked with my kids, my Sunday school children, with raising money for the bricks. And the kids would go out and get bottles and cans and things from the neighbors and all, and we went out and did different things.
The kids raised money for the first 4 rows of the blocks.
The whole perimeter of the church, the main church
and
building.
we watched it. Of course, we come out and watch the progress that was happening. And at first, it's really hard to vision what it looks like, to really get a clear vision. But as it started to take shape, the excitement, was almost, you could just see it in everyone's faces.
And I remember Bob Berg and Norma would come out in a truck with barrels of water in the back of the truck and watering them. And when they couldn't, they would call Ray and me, and we would do it. So those are really special memories. Ray drove the truck and I poured the water because I didn't drive the truck. So it was really exciting for us. But after that, we kind of started working on getting water to the property. And Pastor Bob drove the trencher. He was part in everything. It was just so wonderful.
And we built this building, and we all worked together side by side and worked hard, long days from the dawn of the morning till the darkness of the night. We worked out here under lights and whatever God gave us to do. And it was funny because when we built this building, it was in the rainy season. And no matter what people think about it, this is true. It never rained here. It rained all around us, but it never rained on this spot. In fact, it was so much so that the local radio station, Christian radio station, called me every morning and asked me what the weather was going to be, because it rained everywhere else. It didn't rain here. And we continued to work, and the sun shined here. And people marveled at that. And it was a time when there was a real sort of repressed economy. And people said, you're foolish for trying to build a new building in this economy. It will not work. You will not be able to finish. And in fact, it was the only major building program in the valley. And the Builders magazine came to us and said, can we take a picture and put it on the front page of our magazine to hand out? We don't have anything else. Nothing else is going on. So they took a picture of the church being built, put it on the magazine, and said, it's a marvel. We don't know how you're doing it. Well, I said, God's doing it.
When we got the water on the property, we were out in the front parking lot, wherever the front is. We were out in the front parking lot, and there were a few men that come and got a 5-gallon jug of water and poured it over Pastor Bob's head for celebration. But you should have heard all the roar of the people that were here, how excited they were. It's just like when the Israelites found water, I'm sure. So it reminded me of a journey, and it was great.
And, we were bursting at the Holly Street building. It was pretty packed in there. And it was just so amazing to think that we were able to see this all happen before our eyes, and how the Lord had provided funds when we didn't know where they were going to come from. And, of course, Pastor said there's nothing worse than starting a building program and not being able to finish it. But yet the Lord continued to bless, and funds came in that were needed, and they were able to just build the church.
I remember the scaffolding that was set up to hang the ceiling tile in the auditorium before the carpet was put in. The ceiling tile was in, and Brother Joel Park had a lot to do with that, with his laser beam light system that we used to keep everything nice and level.
Joel Park was very instrumental
Yes, he
in all
was.
that. As a layman, he was sort of the go-between between Pastor Bob and the general contractor and all that was going on there. But he was a tremendous blessing over the years. But specifically in the building of this building, Joel was right there on top of everything, made a supreme sacrifice. We'll not go into that, but
I will. He cut his finger off on a saw.
Somebody needed a saw, and he handed it up to him, lost control of it. It came back down and came on at the same time, took off the end of his first finger. And so he paid the supreme sacrifice. We still kid him about that even today.
So we continued to build, and we finished it in July. It had our first service in July, and it was a tremendous time. The place was packed full. We didn't have much of a parking lot, so cars were parked all over everywhere out here. We just had a tremendous time.
Amen. I'm just sitting here thinking what a great sight this is. 1 Kings in chapter 7, verse 51, Solomon has just completed building the temple of the Lord. And
then we needed to build the court building because we needed more Sunday school classroom and a fellowship hall and things like that. So we began to put the program together to do that. And once again, our dad and us and Ardle Hale, Dad and Ardle Hale, and Ray Barton, Dad and Ardle Hale worked on that every day. They worked on once we got the walls up, and the wind blew the walls down. I came to work one morning and the walls were laying flat on the ground. And that was almost 200 feet of wall that was laying on the ground. I thought, well, everything's going to be broken and we're going to have to start all over again. Went out there to look, and I found out the other wall was down too, and it had blown both walls over. So I called our contractor, and we got a guy out here with a crane, and we lifted those walls, and not one 2x4 was broken, not one. We lifted them all back up, put them all together, re-braced them, and then we began to put the trusses on after that. So God blessed that. But inside that building, there had to be fire blocking in the walls. And our dad, Bob Gass, and Ardle Hale would come in here every day, and they had a table saw set up in the middle of the fellowship hall, and they sawed and put fire block in here every day to the tune of 3,000 pieces of wood. And those two guys worked on that every day. And they laughed, they talked, they had a great time together, they had lunch together. Ardle sawed and Dad hammered. And that's how we got all that block put in there. And they did a lot of other things too. I mean, they helped us with foundations, and it was on a Wednesday night, and I said, we got to pour concrete in the morning. We got to put 2,000 concrete blocks in there. So I said, folks, we need folks to stay tonight and help us do that. And we had rented lights that day, so we lit up the area like daylight. And everybody stayed. Women, children, men, everybody stayed. And it looked like bees at a Baptist picnic. They were all over everything. And for 2 hours or 3 hours was that night after church, we placed those little concrete blocks underneath that wire for the concrete. And those that were smaller or had smaller kids, they walked around with their kids and they picked up trash all around the building site and put it in barrels. People went out and got coffee and went out and got things brought back to those that were working. We worked about midnight that night and we got it done. And by 6 o'clock the next morning when the truck showed up, we were ready. But that just shows again the heart of the people. How genuinely good they were. They wanted God's house to be built. They wanted this place to be here. And many of them have gone on to be with the Lord now, but their children are still here. And God bless in such a marvelous way. Yeah, their grandchildren. And those are special times and very special days that God has done. And here I feel sorry in a way for those who were not here to see it, because it leaves a memory indelibly burned within your conscience that you can never forget. And after all these years, it still tugs at your heart when you think about it. You think about all the sacrifices that were made by our people and the work that they did tirelessly. And no matter what we faced, no matter how hard it was, God continued to bless and people continued to trust Him. That's why this ministry is here today. It's because of faith and genuine love of God's people for God's work. You know, there's a whole bunch of stories like that. This ministry would not exist without the events that happened to get us here, that God orchestrated and made come to pass, and without the heart of people who genuinely loved God, genuinely loved His work, and really wanted this church to be here. And that's why this anniversary, I think, is more about the people than about us.
I think when I think about the future of Harvest and what in my heart of hearts I would like to see is, and we're seeing that right now with these young families and their sweet babies coming into the church and growth happening. We always have heard Pastor Bob say, stick and stay and make it pay. And in my heart, it's stick and stay and watch the blessings come. Because we're making that circle now, Tom and I are making that circle now where we have seen so many blessings from the Lord over these 38 years here. I can't imagine anywhere in the world any better than right here to raise your family and to raise your children and serve Him. That's what I want to see for Harvest, is these people that love the Lord and stay and serve Him and raise their children here.
Young families getting plugged in.
Like we did.
And serve.
And, I don't know where we would be without Harvest Baptist and our pastors. And we want what we're feeling right now in this phase of our life. We want
the young couples
to come up and know that someday they'll be sitting in the limelight and feeling what we feel right now, which is totally blessed of the Lord.
Yeah, the encouragement I would give to the younger generation is when you get to that point in your life where you kind of feel like, wonder what else is out there, and you're debating, maybe I'll leave church and go find another one or something. Just keep sticking on with the church that God put you in. And if you stick with it, eventually you'll have a lifetime behind you, all in the same church where God wanted you.
Well, I think we both look forward in the future to seeing what God's going to do. We're trying to transition the ministry so that there's no gaps, no slowdown, no rollback, but the ministry continues to grow, continues to be strong, and does more than we were ever able to see God do with us. because we're the founding pastors, and you do a lot of building and a lot of framing and a lot of forming during that time. But the next pastor can come and take it from there. Foundation's done. He can build a superstructure now, and that's what we want. We want to see that happen and see the church grow and more souls be saved and more missionaries sent out, more church plants be helped, all that we can do until the Lord comes. And we have plenty of property here. We have 12 acres of property, and we're only using about half of it or a little more for playground and fields, but there's room to build. There's room to handle more people. And our heart's desire is to see that happen if it's the Lord's will, what the Lord would do. And He's continually, over these last 40 years, continued to build, continue to strengthen, and make that foundation strong. And the cornerstone of the Lord Jesus Christ Himself. And so we believe there's a great future ahead for what God has planned for Harvest Baptist in this congregation.